What happens when history repeats itself? How many people have to die? How much damage has to be done for us to learn from our past mistakes? And will human beings ever place the environment and the well-being of the many ahead of the profit of a few? Welcome to Strange and Unexplained with me, Daisy Egan. I'm a person who believes that climate change is real because now we have copperhead snakes in Rhode Island, and what the shit is that if not a freaking response to the ever warmer temperatures of the Northeast? If all the bugs and snakes of Australia start swimming over to this continent, I guess I will have to move to Alaska so I can put myself on an ice floe and push myself out to sea. Presuming there is any ice left there, and it isn't just a tropical Club Med by then. Anyway, I continue to be amazed by the number of people who still think climate change is a hoax and that it's all just weather. It is true that natural disasters have always happened, and too often these natural phenomena collide with human-made disasters. When the endeavors of humans clash violently with the patterns of nature, creating, excuse the pun, a perfect storm of circumstances that wreak terrifying havoc on the lives of innocent people. Today, we are delving into the cataclysmic history of the otherwise sleepy hamlet of Johnstown, Pennsylvania, which, strangers, suffers from a dark, cyclical curse that has shaped its history the way flooding glacial waters can shape and weather the rock it flows over. The mid-1800s was a prosperous time for much of America. Johnstown was no exception. Johnstown was founded in 1800 by German settler Joseph Schantz. Schantz, or Johns as it was anglicized to, was a budding urban planner and captain of industry who sailed from Europe to Philadelphia in 1768 at only 19 years old. Once he landed, he headed west, seeking his fortune in the more rural setting of the Allegheny Mountain Valley. Johns settled in 1793 on a piece of land known as the Campbell Tract, which would become the site of Johnstown in the not-too-distant future. According to Kathy Mellett, writing for the Tribune-Democrat out of Pennsylvania in 2010, quote, "He laid out the settlement he named Conemaugh Old Town and built the first house, a log cabin, at what is now Vine and Levergood Streets. The German immigrant set about planning streets, areas for recreation, places for worship. His hope was that his settlement would be named the county seat for Cambria County, which was then being formed. His plan was for the county courthouse to be built on the land that is now Johnstown Central Park." End quote. You could say Johns was a young visionary. It's pretty impressive stuff. When I was 19, I was coming off my first nervous breakdown, drinking too much, and dating the son of a Southern preacher with whom I had nothing in common but said yes to when he proposed because I didn't want to hurt his feelings. I would imagine divorcing him hurt his feelings a lot worse than not marrying him in the first place would have. Oops. Anyway, Johns was ambitious and saw his vision become a reality when the serene and safe community from his plans came into being. Johnstown quickly grew into a bustling center for the surrounding area. You know what they say, location, location, location. Nestled between the Little Conemaugh River and the Stony Creek River, and abutting the Cambria Iron Works, Johnstown was the natural epicenter for the network of townships that grew to roughly 30,000 people by the 1830s. Johnstown was predominantly German, like its founder, but large groups of Welsh, Irish, Scandinavian, and Jewish immigrants also began to arrive by the mid to late 1800s. People dreamed of living in such a naturally beautiful landscape, away from the major cities they had known before. There was work in the burgeoning steel industry and coal mines of the area, and as the demand for iron grew throughout the 1800s due to the Civil War and the Industrial Revolution, the ironworks only became bigger and more important to the region. The South Fork Dam was approved in 1836 and began construction in 1840 when the creation of a canal that ran from Pittsburgh to Johnstown used the Conemaugh River as its main water source. The river was too low during the dry season to adequately feed the canal. Another water source became necessary to keep the canal viable. To fix this problem, an earthen dam in the Little Conemaugh River was built, and the Western Reservoir was created. An earthen dam is a structure made of, earth, obviously, but it's not just a pile of dirt. Earthen dams use layers of earth at the bank of the river, and a gate or spillway is added to control the water flow. According to expertcivil.com, the advantages of earthen dams are, quote, 1, it can be simply and economically constructed with locally available material. 2, the design of the dam is also quite easy, so a variety of materials can be used to construct the dam. 3, any type of foundation is suitable for this dam. 4, where there is a wide layer of the valley, it is suitable to construct, end quote. Whereas the disadvantages are, quote, 1, it causes a lot of leakage and soil erosion, and 2, due to improper capacity, it may fail, end quote. Yeah, remember that. So the Western Reservoir that was eventually formed by the dam was a 10-foot deep body of water with one spillway in case the water depth should rise above 10 feet. But the dam's construction was a slow process. Between 1842 and 1851, work on the dam was stopped when the project ran out of funding. Being economical doesn't mean free, after all. Later studies by civil engineers showed that this work stoppage actually caused damages to the South Fork Dam before it was even complete. This was borne out when, according to the National Park Service in 1847, the incomplete South Fork Dam failed for the first time. I tried to find more information on that failure, and there is surprisingly nothing to be found beyond references in passing to it. One can assume it wasn't a deadly incident, but as I said, it was only the first time the dam would fail. Hold on to that. Nevertheless, construction resumed, and new specs for the dam were created. On June 10, 1852, the dam was finally finished, and the Western Reservoir, holding its 480 million cubic feet of water, was created. Strangers, it's fall, and any day now Mother Nature will get the memo and start acting like it's fall. Any day now. And when she finally does, I'll be ready with my soft, luxurious, and temperature-regulating sheets from Miracle Made. No matter the weather, I like to sleep in the buff. And with Miracle Made sheets, I can do that because the silver-infused fabric from technology inspired by NASA keeps me toasty and warm all night long. But not so warm that I'm sweating like an old guy in a sauna. And they keep my husband at whatever weird temperature he needs at night. That guy is an enigma. Who sleeps in full flannel pajamas in the summer? I'll tell you who does. That guy. Miracle Made keeps us both asleep and acne and cold free because the sheets prevent almost 100% of bacteria growth. Bacteria, it turns out, causes acne and colds. Who knew? NASA knew, probably. Anyway, get the Miracle Made sheets and bedding. I promise you won't regret it. And if for some reason you do, you can return them for your money back. Their customer service is great. Go to trymiracle.com/strange to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use our promo code STRANGE at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. Miracle is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a refund. Upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/strange and use the code STRANGE to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off. Again, that's trymiracle.com/strange to treat yourself. Thank you, Miracle Made, for sponsoring this episode. About a year later, the South Fork Dam and Western Reservoir were deemed ready for use and operation. The dam and resulting reservoir were considered a marvel of modern engineering. Canals were all the rage in the 1800s when they were widely used as a means of transporting goods as well as people, as the construction of the American Railroad was not yet in full swing everywhere. The existence of the dam and reservoir allowed canals of reasonable depths to be maintained throughout the area, promising travel and access to merchandise for the somewhat remote northern Appalachian region. Ironically, in 1854, just 1 year after the completion of the dam and just as it was ready for use, it was made obsolete by the expanding railway system. The hard-won canal system, once thought of as so crucial to the industrial future of the area, was declared defunct. The formerly booming Pennsylvania Mainline Canal went out of business, and in 1857, just 5 years after the dam's completion, the Pennsylvania Railroad Company purchased the defunct canal system at auction and dug into the canal beds to extend the train tracks and create even more access for the valley community. The railroad system had extended its reach within central Pennsylvania, where the Cambria Iron Works fabricated the very tracks on which the train ran, and Johnstown, already a bustling center of the area, became one of the busiest towns in America. People, lumber, and iron continued to move through the area, now via train. It was in the midst of this industrial boom for Johnstown in 1862 that the South Fork Dam had its second failure. Heavy rains and a lack of overall maintenance caused the dam to overflow. Fortunately, the 22,000 tons of water inside the reservoir only rose a few feet that day. But this failure was a dark harbinger of things to come. The next year, the canal between Johnstown and Blairsville closed completely, and when that happened, there was no longer a viable reason to maintain the South Fork Dam. In 1875, Pennsylvania Railroad Company and U.S. Congressman John Riley bought the neglected South Fork Dam for $2,500. Huh, that's cool. I just paid that for groceries. Boy, times have changed. For the better! Yep. Riley removed the 5 sluice pipes at the base of the dam. Some say he did this for the lead in the pipes, which carried some value at the time. I guess that's like the old-school equivalent of stripping the copper pipes out of an abandoned home or stealing catalytic converters, except legal, because he owned it anyway. I do wonder, though, about the use of lead in the pipes. The ancient Romans all went mad because their famously sophisticated viaduct system incorporated lead pipes, which some think led to the downfall of the Roman Empire. Lead is bad. We know this. I hate to think about what Riley wanted the lead from the pipes for. Bullets? Pewter for dragon figurines? Whatever it was, it seems like a great example of how human beings tend to value resources only for what we can squeeze out of them to make money. Unfortunately for the people of Johnstown and the surrounding areas, the removal of the sluice pipes aggravated an existing sag at the top of the dam, making it more susceptible to overtopping and leaving few options for the safe removal of excess water. Once he got what he wanted from it, Riley sold the dam to Benjamin Franklin Ruff, the founder and first president of the South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club, known simply as the Club. Ruff was a railroad tunnel contractor, a real estate broker, and a coke salesman. In this instance, coke is a coal byproduct, not nose candy. He was not the Scarface of Johnstown Valley, burying his face in a pile of blow in between real estate deals and trysts with his mistress. Though, in all honesty, I suppose he might have been doing that and we just never heard about it. I did see a picture of Ruff, though, and he could have been mistaken for Blackbeard the pirate because he had a huge bushy beard of the blackest hair imaginable, which did not at all match the hair on his head. Crazy. Also, pretty hard to clean cocaine out of a huge black bushy beard, so he probably wasn't doing that. Anyway, according to a page about Ruff maintained by the National Park Service, quote, Ruff paid $2,000 for the property, which was $500 less than Congressman Riley had paid for it 4 years earlier when he had bought it from Pennsylvania. As founder of the club, Ruff bought 8 shares of stock at $800. End quote. The club boasted the membership of industrial titans like Andrew Carnegie and Henry Clay Frick, who may also have been a co-owner of the dam and after joining the club became its spokesman and promoter. Ruff served as club president until his death in 1887. These men, in the infinite wisdom of the very rich, decided to transform the dam into a recreational site, including a reservoir stocked with fish, rather than a reliable flood control measure. According to NPS.gov, quote, the first idea that Ruff, who had no experience in waterworks and dam construction, proposed for the rebuilding of the dam was to construct it to a height of about 40 feet and cut the spillway down some 20 feet deeper to handle the overflow. But when he found out this would cost considerably more than repairing the old break of July 1862 and restoring the dam to somewhere near its original height, he chose the latter course. Ruff then employed as foreman and superintendent of the work Edward Pearson. This was a curious appointment since Pearson had no engineering training and had never been engaged as a contractor on a waterworks or dam construction project. End quote. Cool. So a dude with no experience with engineering or dams hired a dude with no experience with engineering or dams to help him with engineering his dam. Got it. The National Park Service went on to say, quote, Ruff set about repairing the dam by boarding up the stone culvert and dumping in every manner of local rock, mud, brush, hemlock boughs, hay, just about everything at hand. Even horse manure was used in some quantity. The discharge pipes, which had been removed previous to the club's ownership, most likely by John Riley, were not replaced, and the engineering techniques employed made a profound impression on the local bystanders. End quote. I'll bet. This dynamic duo and their team also lowered the top of the dam to make it wider for carriages and put fish screens over the spillway. Imagine their surprise when, on Christmas Day 1879, a rainstorm came and washed away all of their repairs. What? Rain washes away mud, brush, hemlock boughs, hay, and horse shit? Who knew? Besides, everyone. By then, the construction of the Stone, Pennsylvania Railroad Bridge, a 7-arch bridge that spans the Conemaugh River, was complete, solidifying Johnstown as a major stop along the Pennsylvania Railroad and bringing even more European immigrants to the area. These new immigrants joined the already large working-class community. Cambria Iron Works employed 3/4 of the people living in the region and housed many of those workers in substandard, flimsy housing along the banks of the river at water level. I'm sure we can all see where that was going to go. The other quarter of the population enjoyed the spoils of their capitalist enterprise, living in more comfortable homes in town, not right next to the river at water level. On May 31st, 1889, heavy rains began to fall, and the systematic neglect of the South Fork Dam led to yet another catastrophe. As the storm intensified, so did the flow of water, as any third grader might have predicted. By the time the storm had peaked, the dam, already weakened by years of neglect, was at capacity. At around 11:30 a.m., the water began to overflow the reservoir. By 3 p.m., the earthen dam, which had been slowly letting water in, compromising its integrity, which relied on its watertightness, had eroded to the point where it finally gave way. By 4 p.m., a 35-foot-high, half-a-mile-wide wall of water was unleashed into the valley below. The force was such that this immense wave carried everything in its path, homes, barns, trees, and people along with it, picking up speed and becoming more and more dangerous to anything and anyone in its way. The scene was one of utter devastation. The thriving, homey community of Johnstown was reduced to ruins in a matter of hours. The flood claimed over 2,200 lives and left 1,600 homes destroyed. According to the Johnstown Area Heritage Associate website, bodies were found as far away as Cincinnati, Ohio, and as late as 1911. 99 entire families died in the flood, including 396 children. 124 women and 198 men were widowed. 98 children were orphaned. And 1/3 of the dead, 777 people, were never identified. Although there were warnings sent about the dam's failure, they were either ignored or were not effectively communicated to the residents of Johnstown. When the danger was imminent, club engineer John Park Jr. tried to warn the town, but only managed to reach South Fork before the dam breached. The combination of the quickness with which everything occurred, along with the complacency of a people who had heard warnings before only to have the fallout be negligible, left the citizens of the area exposed to dangerous conditions with no protections. The 1889 disaster represented a critical failure of both engineering and communication. The stories of those who survived are as harrowing as anything you could imagine. One Mrs. Anna Fenn Maxwell and her husband were helping neighbors move their furniture to higher ground at the beginning of the flooding. But as things quickly escalated, she first watched her husband get washed away. According to the Johnstown Area Heritage website, she held onto her baby while her other 6 children clung to her. But one after the other, they drowned. Anna later said, quote, "The water rose and floated us until our heads nearly touched the ceiling. It was dark, and the house was tossing every way. The air was stifling, and I could not tell just the moment the rest of the children had to give up and drown. What I suffered, with the bodies of my 7 children floating around me in the gloom, can never be told." End quote. Anna's suffering didn't end on that day with the death of her children, however. She gave birth just a few weeks later, and that baby didn't survive. 16-year-old Victor Heiser reported watching a 2-story mass of debris crashing down the valley toward his home, where he lived with his parents. His home was crushed, and his parents disappeared. Victor was able to ride the flood wave downstream, avoiding freight cars, animals, and other detritus, and likely bodies as well, until he passed a 2-story brick house. According to the Heritage website, Victor, quote, "desperately leapt for the roof of the house. He made it and spent the night in the attic with 19 other survivors, praying the building wouldn't collapse. His parents died in the flood, and the family's downtown store was gone. All he had from his former life was a trunk from his parents' house filled with his father's Civil War uniform, a few pieces of silver, and his mother's Bible. It had somehow survived the flood and been returned to Victor, the family's sole survivor." End quote. Victor went on to become a doctor and developed a treatment for leprosy, saving millions of people. One family managed to remain completely intact despite all odds by perching on the joists of their unfinished and non-existent attic floor and fishing each other out of the water when they fell in. A Reverend Dr. David Beale called it a, quote, "night of indescribable horror." Only days after the flood, the newly formed American Red Cross arrived to provide relief, led by its founder, nurse and American war hero, Clara Barton. Barton brought upwards of 50 doctors and nurses with her and soon founded what would become the Conemaugh Health System. Barton and her team stayed in Johnstown for nearly 5 months, providing aid, medical care, and assisting with cleanup and rebuilding. An official investigation into the dam breach was launched, and the report was released in May 1891, a year after the flood had devastated the lives and livelihoods of Johnstown residents. By then, lawyer, former school principal, and all-around Good Samaritan Daniel Hastings, who was put in charge of the recovery efforts in Johnstown, had begun the long process of rebuilding Johnstown so that the community could go about their lives and move on from the tragedy they had all endured. Daniel Hastings later became governor of Pennsylvania, and it is very likely that his response to the South Fork flood was one of the things that helped him get elected. During the investigation, the Cambria and Westmoreland County coroner juries correctly concluded the dam failure was to blame for the flood, and though it was never officially stated, the juries and the survivors of the flood placed the blame on the shoulders of the South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club for its negligence. According to geoinstitute.org's article about the floods, one elegy read, quote, "All of the horrors that hell could wish, such was the price that was paid for fish," end quote. Listen, I know it was a different time and people were short on entertainment, but I don't know. Something about making a cheeky poem out of the deaths of thousands of people seems tacky. Like, whoever wrote that sat there and thought it up, wrote it down, and then probably workshopped it with his wife or whatever and was like, say, that's pretty good, send it to the press. Geoinstitute.org went on to quote the Johnstown Daily Tribune in contemporary coverage of the disaster. Quote, "Our misery is the work of man," end quote. When is it not? Am I right? I'm just kidding. Some people I know are men. The club didn't do itself any favors with their response to the tragedy. Geoinstitute.org went on to say, quote, "The members of the now ruined club hardly helped their image. Andrew Carnegie financed a new library in Johnstown, and Andrew Mellon, Henry Clay Frick, and Robert Pitcairn also made substantial individual or corporate contributions to the flood relief funds. However, about 30 club members contributed nothing. The offer the club extended to shelter flood orphans in the clubhouse struck many as tasteless," end quote. Oof. Maybe they could let the orphans eat cake in the clubhouse while being sheltered there? Interestingly, I couldn't find many reports of hauntings related to the flood. Given what I've learned about ghosts over the past few years, one would think Johnstown would be, well, flooded with trapped souls who lost their lives when that dam broke. I googled Ghosts of Johnstown, which took me to a regular column in a local paper there about perpetrators of crime who remain at large. The website Haunted Pittsburgh Tours claims Johnstown has an, quote, "unparalleled legacy of the paranormal," end quote. While one paranormal expert allegedly claimed the entire town was, quote, "bursting with paranormal activity," end quote, the only stories I could find, including on that very website, were, well, pretty tame. Quote, "At the unknown plot at Grandview Cemetery, the final resting place for 777 unidentified victims recovering from the flood, a ghost hunter led an investigation of the spiritual activity. Her finds? A photo depicting a floating orb in motion and an audio recording of a girl's voice that pleaded, 'Please save me.' At the old stone bridge, some claim they've heard screams of the people trapped in the horrific aftermath of the flood. A few years ago, Haunted Pittsburgh took a medium around Johnstown. She was overcome with an overwhelming sense of panic. Not her own, and not just the panic of the poor souls who met death so unexpectedly on May 31st, 1889. She said that much of the panic that still hangs over the place emanates from the South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club. Like a broken record, it keeps replaying itself, hoping in vain for a different outcome, and wishing it could undo something that never should have happened," end quote. Look, I am often overcome with an overwhelming sense of panic. Just the other day, I had an inexplicable panic attack in a perfectly bucolic apple orchard. Was I tapping into some horrific event that took place there years ago? Or do I have a panic disorder? If I were an enterprising person, might I use my panic disorder to my financial advantage and pretend each time I have a panic attack, I'm actually feeling the panic of dead people? Actually, that's not a bad idea. In the spring of 1936, Johnstown was taking on heavy rains after a very snowy winter and a thaw which produced a sudden snowmelt, causing the rivers to swell once again. This time, having learned from past mistakes, the city had made significant improvements to the water management system. President Franklin D. Roosevelt had engaged the Works Progress Administration and the Army Corps of Engineers to channelize the local streams and to build new flood walls in Johnstown. Those improvements were not yet complete, but it was believed that enough had been done to render the city flood-proof. That theory was tested and proved to be partly true. The flood was severe, but Johnstown did not suffer anywhere near the same level of devastation as it had in 1889. The new infrastructure had significantly improved the safety and recovery of Johnstown, but the city still faced significant challenges. By the time the waters receded, it was clear that the struggle against flooding was far from over. In 1943, the new channelizing of the rivers was finally complete, and for over 20 years it seemed that Johnstown had solved its flood problem. Then, in July of 1977, 8 to 10 hours of heavy rains fell on central Pennsylvania, and up to a foot of rain in some places led, once again, to major flash flooding in Johnstown. The Laurel Run Dam, another earthen dam that had been constructed in the late 1800s and held 101 million gallons of water, as well as 6 other local dams, failed. But still, somehow, the protections held, and the rise of water in Johnstown was mercifully not equal to the devastation of floods past. A recently elected Jimmy Carter quickly declared a federal disaster in 8 Pennsylvania counties, including Cambria. His swift action helped bring attention and aid to Johnstown. The 1977 flood was damaging and scary, but it also spurred further improvements in flood management and emergency response. Johnstown, after experiencing flood after flood, had learned a little more each time about how to cope with nature's power and unpredictability. At this point, 50 years after the last Johnstown flood, it might be easy to say we've learned our lessons. But, of course, we know that's not true, as just over a week before recording this, Hurricane Helene swept through 6 states, including Pennsylvania, left more than 100 people dead, washed away homes, and left hundreds and hundreds stranded without power, food, or water. These environmental disasters are only growing in frequency and severity with each year. Despite lessons learned from past disasters, it seems our infrastructure cannot keep up. What happened in Johnstown over and over again is a sobering reminder of the consequences of human error and environmental disregard. As American historian and Johnstown flood expert David McCullough wrote in the 50th anniversary of his book on the 1889 flood, quote, "Today, the lessons to be learned from the Johnstown flood are more relevant than ever," end quote. It's a simple statement, but one that resonates, and a reminder that infrastructure is a vital budget line item and regulations are a good thing. As the old saying goes, stranger, those who don't learn from the past are doomed to repeat it. Is our learning curve as a species more like 1 step forward, 2 steps back? Like a kind of signing our own death warrant apocalypse now cha-cha? Or will we use our considerable inventiveness, tenacity, adaptability, and vision for something other than making money? Because God knows, we don't lack for ingenuity. Next time on Strange and Unexplained, we'll take a trip to Astoria, Queens in 2017, when a young, up-and-coming writer and cartoonist with BuzzFeed got a visit from a ghost that just happened to come along with a movie deal. The Tale of Dear David. Strange and Unexplained is a production of Three Goose Entertainment with help from Grab Bag Collab. This episode was written by Eve Kerrigan and me, Daisy Egan, with research by the Strange Research Squad. Editing help from Amber Hunt, and sound engineering and mixing by Amanda Rossman. If you have an idea for an episode, head to our website, strangeandunexplainedpod.com, and fill out the contact form. I will write back. For more amazing content, join us at patreon.com/grabbagcollab, where for just $5 a month, you get all the Grab Bag exclusive shows, and for $8, you get those, plus Amber Hunt's Crimes of the Centuries and Strange and Unexplained early and ad-free. Grab Bag is an all-female and non-binary-owned profit-share network where our contributors get to keep ownership of their shows. We strive to give a platform to those who may not be able to land themselves on a bigger network. Who knows, maybe you have a podcast idea you'd like to pitch to Grab Bag. We've got live recordings, watch parties, book clubs, and more. Why there's so much going on over at Grab Bag, you'll wonder if we missed the memo on how capitalism works. Join me on Instagram at SNUPod, Daisy Egan, and Grab Bag Collab. Or head to the Facebook page to join in the conversation. If you like the show, please visit a sponsor with our unique code, give us a quick review and 5 stars, subscribe and download, and tell a friend. Right now in particular, the show could really use your support to counteract those who were pretty upset about last week's episode. Stay strange.